return, though, to Senator Kamala Harris, beginning a 3-day campaign tour of Iowa today, as yet more new polling shows her rapidly overtaking much of the Democratic presidential field after last week's debate performance. A national poll from Quinnipiac University shows Joe Biden down 8 points from a month ago to 22%, and Kamala Harris just 2 points behind at 20%. She is up 13 points since just 3 weeks ago. Senator Elizabeth Warren is in third with 14%. Bernie Sanders dropped 6 points to 13%. Mayor Pete Buttigieg down 4 points to 4%. Senator Cory Booker rising to 3%. This poll lines up with other recent polls showing Biden and Sanders in decline, while Warren and Kamala Harris are on the rise. The Quinnipiac poll also shows Democrats are rethinking who is the most electable candidate. Asked who has the best chance of winning against President Trump, Joe Biden is seen as the strongest by 42%, but that's dropped from 56% in April. Senator Kamala Harris has risen 12 points to 14% in this poll, while Bernie Sanders holds relatively steady at 13%, but Elizabeth Warren is on the rise as well, the senator up 6 points to 9%. In Iowa, a USA Today Suffolk University poll puts Biden in the lead with 24% and Harris in second at 16%, Warren there at 13%, and Sanders, who nearly shocked Hillary Clinton in the 2016 caucuses, in fourth place with 9%. Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and Senator Booker also register in this poll, which counts toward qualifying for the third debate in September. So, Kristen, let's go back to the first set of the polls. We can get to Iowa in just a second, but that Quinnipiac poll lining up with what we saw yesterday in a CNN poll, which is Joe Biden down and Kamala Harris rising quickly.
That's right. I think a lot of this, in part, is people giving the broader field a look after these debates. A lot of speculation before them was Joe Biden's lead, mainly a product of name ID. I don't think it was. I think there are a lot of folks, especially he had a large contingent of support among African-American voters that was pretty strong. But after those debates, when he was pressed on his positions from the 1970s, from the 1980s, going back through his record, it's showing this is not just going to be a cakewalk for him. You still have, for the most part, the same kind of first and second tier of candidates that you had before. The top five is still mostly the top five. None of the sort of 1% candidates had a breakout moment. But in that top five, things have been shaken up in a way that has got to be making Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren pretty happy. So, Karine, we talked about this a little bit in Miami, which is for those of us in the political world, we know a lot about these candidates. We sort of know where they stand. We think we understand them. But to the country, that was the introduction. Exactly. Last Wednesday and Thursday night, that was the introduction. Who are these people? What do they believe? What's their style? And Kamala Harris showed them something, and that's why she's up 13 points.
She did 18 million viewers, I think, on Thursday, 15 million viewers on Wednesday. Yep. That's a big haul. And who knows, when you think about the social media aspect, how many more millions of people watched. And look, it was an opportunity to introduce yourself, to let people know who you are, because we knew going in that Bernie and Biden had the name recognition. They had that name ID. And so now they were both tested in many ways, because Bernie, we see that his numbers are a little soft, right? They're not as strong as that we thought that they were as well. And the women surged. The two women that won the debates are surging. And I think that says a lot. But just to be clear, it's still very early. Yep. We're at the early stages of this. We have a long way to go, and it's fluid.
And this was probably inevitable, Eddie, that Joe Biden wasn't going to sit there 20 points up and just cruise along for a year to the nomination. What do you think his campaign takes out of his performance last week and the reaction in the polls this week?
Well, I think the strategy of just kind of assuming that you can run towards the general election during the primary has to be thrown into the trash can. If they do that, then this is just Hillary Clinton 2.0. Right. And I think he's going to have to be much more aggressive in terms of laying out his policy positions and trying to demonstrate to particularly Democratic voters, the base, that he's not just simply a backward-looking candidate, right? That he actually can provide the leadership for moving forward, for addressing our contemporary problems, and to provide a vision for the country moving forward. What's interesting, though, in terms of the black voter support for Biden, I'm remembering the primary before the 2008 election, and remember most the black political class and a lot of black folk generally supported Hillary Clinton.
Oh, they did.
While Barack Obama was kind of languishing in the shadows. And then suddenly something happened in Iowa. And then so folks said, oh, this guy might win. So these practical voters who are attracted to name recognition, who are supporting someone who was a part of the first black administration, will continue to look. And if Kamala Harris continues to rise, we might see a change in those numbers for Biden.
And it is early, Mike Allen. As Karine says, Joe Biden has a big and a wide and a deep base of support over 50 years almost in public life. But based on what he did on Thursday night, the way he looked, the way he reacted to Kamala Harris when she came at him a little bit, should he be concerned about the future of this race?
Well, I can tell you the people around him are very concerned. Just while we've been talking here, a Washington Post, ABC News poll popped up showing Biden durable in the lead. But why are people around him really worried? Like, what they say to me is, this is what we were afraid of, that it's not just looking rusty, but it's going into this debate making a mistake that no rookie would. And that is not being prepared, not having an offensive strategy, not being ready for some obvious hits that were coming. So another debate, July 30th, Biden has the chance there to exceed expectations. But people have been around these campaigns worry that the damage will not be in what actually happened that night, but what it shows about where the vice president is. Is he really ready to transcend the idea that he's a man out of time? Because it's just such fleeting impressions that come away from these debates. Axios has some reporting up this morning from SurveyMonkey, which did word clouds based on the talking to 1,000 voters who watched each debate. What did you really remember? And from the first debate, it was speaking Spanish was what broke through. But from the second debate, the word cloud, it's just the big word, Kamala Harris. She had her moment like a prosecutor. She prepared, and she stuck her landing.
Yeah, they were ready for that. So, Kristen, all the focus has been on Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and rightly so. But there's also something else happening when you look at the polls, and that is in the sort of the Warren-Sanders lane, where Elizabeth Warren in that progressive group slowly has steadily overtaken Bernie Sanders.
That's right. And I think, to the point that Eddie made earlier about the need for somebody like a Biden to kind of put his plans out there, put his policy proposals out there, that's obviously something that Elizabeth Warren has been doing a lot of over the last couple of months. I think something else that she's done that's very savvy was, one, by being sort of the star on that first night of the debate, gave her an opportunity to really have a breakout moment and introduce herself. But also, she's running on a populist message where she's running kind of against corporations, running against big business, almost more so than running against President Trump. But she's not wrapping herself in the overt language of the word socialism. Bernie Sanders a couple of weeks ago gave a speech sort of defending the concept of democratic socialism. Elizabeth Warren stays away from that, stays on sort of safer ground with a very progressive economic agenda that some folks on the Republican side would call socialist adjacent. But she herself stays away from that word. And I think that's very powerful. I think that's important in showing Democratic voters have a populist economic view, but aren't necessarily willing to go all the way where Bernie Sanders is trying to take things.
Yeah, she's clear on that. We've asked her on this show, what do you think about socialism? She says, I'm a proud capitalist, but we've got to do a lot better within capitalism, and here's why. Kristen, stay with us. Mike Allen, thank you very much. Happy 4th of July to you, my friend.
To you and yours.
All right.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.